This is Austin Liti Limits, where authors talk to authors about books and the craft of storytelling. Sponsored by Blue Ink Review, because typing the end is just the beginning. Find out more at blueinkreview.com. Amy Gentry is the author of feminist thrillers Good Is Gone and Last Woman Standing. Her book reviews and essays have appeared in numerous outlets, including the Chicago Tribune, Salon, and the Paris Review. When she's not writing, she likes decorating cakes and watching horror movies. Her newest novel is Bad Habits.
All right, so welcome to the show, Amy Gentry.
You, Scott, it's so nice to be here.
It's nice to see you. So your latest novel, Bad Habits, is this excellent suspense novel. It's psychologically intense. Oh, there you go. And yeah, I got my copy right here. In fact, I just finished reading it this morning. It has a great twisty ending. And so it starts with Gwen, and it's Claire at first, but it's really Mac as you get to know her later on in the story. Her old friends, and they reconnect at a conference, and that's where the story starts to unspool. Can you talk about the initial nugget of inspiration for the story?
Yeah, absolutely. So unlike most ideas, for me at least, this idea kind of came to me in a dream as a set of images that I wanted to take out and expand because they were so suggestive to me. So this dream, I was on a retreat with my husband, or like a vacation, mini vacation, and I had been dreaming about these two best friends, and I was kind of one of them. And we were going up this staircase, like a stairwell in a hotel that like is really, really high. And we were having this argument. It was really intense. And, it was like maybe someone didn't get invited to someone's wedding or something like that. But it was as we got higher and higher, we were going up these stairs, and the argument was just getting more and more intense and confrontational and like real the higher we got. And then there was this like sense of foreboding, like when we get to the top, one of us is going to die. So
Right.
that was a really visceral dream. And I woke up thinking like, oh God, it would be great to like write something about, that takes this female friendship and like takes whatever's happening with them and kind of expands it out. And when I thought about like, well, what would cause these two best friends to turn against each other so viscerally, and that the one wants to murder the other, I've been one place where people behave badly enough to
Right.
kind of imagine that happening, and it was grad school. So I just had been carrying around that setting for a while, and also thinking like, someday maybe we'll delve into this setting, and it seemed like the right time. So Bad Habits was born.
Wow, that's very interesting. I've read interviews with people who talk about getting things from dreams. Paul McCartney said the song Yesterday came to him in a dream, and I can't even think of that. I've had daydreams where stories have come out, but not dreams while I'm sleeping.
Think I mean, some people are more intense dreamers than others. I don't know
Mm,
why. I take after, like, everyone in my family has really, really intense dreams.
right.
And so I have a lot of like very vivid, usually they're stressful and not like happy dreams.
Mm,
So yeah, but I've never really, you wake up and they're kind of like, okay, this brilliant idea is maybe not so brilliant on awakening. But I
right.
think the images from them can be, the visceral feeling of being inside that world can like be really suggestive. So
Right. And so in the story, the narrator, Mac, who's also Claire, she has a very astute ability to observe people, particularly Gwen, and she knows her so well that she can kind of like
mm.
extrapolate her intentions, things like that when she's talking. Can you talk about that a little bit about their friendship and what that brings to the intensity of the story?
Yeah, absolutely. I always kind of want to be writing psychological fiction, even if it's not suspense, but in this case, psychological suspense, because I am really interested in like what makes people tick, and particularly in this book, and in all my books actually, on I guess what makes people do bad things. Um,
Mm,
and I think, I don't actually really believe in like a difference between like villains and victims. I think in it's a lot of it is context and sort of response to environments. So that was kind of like um that was kind of, what I was exploring with this book, right? I was like, well, what could make someone want to murder someone that they loved so much,
right.
Um, and for Mac, she comes from this kind of like I would call it like an insecure background. I mean, an unstable. She's not sort of impoverished most of the time, but her mother, has an addiction problem, and her
Mm,
sister has a disability, and so she's been kind of adultified or parentified,
right.
early. And so she meets Gwen, and Gwen comes from this like very posh family,
Mm,
and Gwen is also intellectually curious like Mac, and has a lot of kind of aesthetic interests, and some ambition as well. But Gwen has been kind of nurtured in this like environment that's so perfect for that. And so I think Mac kind of at the time when she meets Gwen in high school, they click right away, but then they also have this glaring difference between them. And so, I think that class differences like that have been explored a lot in recent fiction. And female friendship and these kind of points of comparison and tension.
mm,
But yeah, really for me it was about trying to give them a real connection, that we could really root for, but also at the same time maintaining this idea. Mac is the narrator, so it's all through her point of view.
mm,
And maintaining this idea that Mac's perceptions of the situation will always be filtered through this difference and through her own background, and knowing that Gwen can sort of never understand what it's like to be where she is and has been. So yeah, that makes her observations very keen and
mm,
not inaccurate, but like a little suspect.
right.
She's very quick to perceive a grievance
Mm,
or that kind of thing. So.
right. Yeah. Mac's background is very interesting because it's like her mother and sister are almost like an albatross, and you could just kind of feel her trying to claw her way out of it when it's really um, her upbringing isn't that bad.
Mhm,
But,
mhm.
I think to her, she perceives it as it's a place she wants to leave.
Yeah, I mean, again, I think it's really more about her trauma than her upbringing. If I think about it,
Hmm.
I've talked to people who had similar situations in their families, and it doesn't it doesn't like entirely define them, obviously. This is not a
Hmm.
situation where you're on the street or there's like
Right.
severe need of that kind. But at the same time, she kind of, her mother like sort of it's a single parent household, and her mother kind of disappears for like a week and a half or something
Right.
while she's very young. I can't remember how old, maybe like 10 or something. Um, and she has to kind of hide it and like keep the household running, including like her younger sister who has pretty severe, needs.
Right.
So, that kind of experience, even if it's not that she was like impoverished her whole life, that kind of experience and having that situation of not being able to trust that people will have your back, that like when you're a
Right.
child, having to be in that situation is traumatizing.
Hmm.
So I think you're totally right, though. I think it's really crucial to the book. It was crucial to the book not to give her the rock bottom experience,
Right.
because I feel like that's, it's very obvious, and
Hmm.
it's, I want you to come in thinking like I sympathize with Mac, but also there's like a layer of distance because she is, I mean, I don't think it's a spoiler to say that it's like a making of a villain story,
Right.
basically. She is
Hmm.
not the hero. She's the protagonist, but she's may not be, depending on your perception, she may not be the hero in.
Right. So I was reading an interview with you recently where you talked about screenplays and you had studied screenplays after you wrote your first book, and you had made a comment that the best books about plot were about screenplays. And so can you talk about that a little bit about what studying screenplays brings to your writing?
Yeah, absolutely. So the first book I wrote, Good Is Gone, was not really ever intended to be a mystery or a thriller. I didn't really read much in that genre, and so I just had like an ignorance of that genre. And
Interesting.
and it ended up kind of coming out that way because there
Hmm.
was a kidnapping. So like, yeah, it's a crime novel.
Right.
And it was picked up and marketed that way. And so I, then had to write a second one under contract. And
Hmm.
so I figured, I mean, I kind of panicked a little. I had read a bunch of Patricia Highsmith. That was kind of my main experience and a few one-offs. But I was like, I pieced this plot together out of God knows how, like over, a year of cutting things up and moving them around.
Hmm.
Um, Now I have to do it again and I have to start from scratch. So I did go looking for plot resources. And I think the first book I read was Robert McGee's Story, because it gets recommended a lot. But then I ended up a friend recommended Save the Cat,
Yeah.
the
Right. Classic.
absolute most,
Mhm.
probably the most influential on this era
Right.
screenwriting text. And I was really fascinated. And first of all, the first thing that sold me on this was seeing that, in fact, Good As Gone followed those beats. Like I had essentially recreated three act structure from
Right.
scratch in the
Yeah.
most labor intensive way possible. So I
Right.
was like, well, if I'm already doing this, I might as well learn how to do it like well and like a little bit be conscious of what I'm doing. And the screenwriting books are the only ones that just break it down. Like they're
Hmm.
very demystifying. So there's not this, I think that people are afraid of talking about plot in the literary world as if it's this dirty word, and that, that like really this is like a personal, I don't know, it's like kind of nails on a chalkboard for me because I'm
Right.
like, we all started reading, like maybe we got into reading when we fell in love with Jane Austen or Tolstoy. These people use plot,
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
It's not
Hmm.
like, but it's never something you study. And I mean, in like a academic program.
Hmm.
So anyway, I just kind of was like fascinated by the mechanics of it,
Yeah.
frankly. It's like I find it to be I also love math. And
Hmm.
it's like a dirty secret. But I love the kind of elegance of a formula
Right.
and how infinitely flexible a formula is.
Hmm.
So when you talk about like how am I applying it in my work, first of all, I started teaching it because I love it so much that I just like could not stop ingesting it.
Yeah.
Um, I don't outline. I don't know how. My books I try to outline, they turn out bad.
Yeah.
So I use it more as like a kind of to guide, to get me from like one thing to the next,
Hmm.
and to kind of check my progress to be like, well, I mean, if nothing has happened,
Yeah.
but like if the inciting incident is just taking forever to get to, or like why, is this like setup not really landing? Why are people saying they don't understand this character? Like
Hmm.
it's just a way of yeah, it's a way of kind of having goals to work to story-wise.
Right.
Because I think a lot of novelists, and I could talk about this all day, sorry, go on. But I
No, I
think a
love
lot of
it. No, keep going.
novelists,
Hmm.
anyone who's written or tried to write a lot of novels has had the experience of like writing 50 pages and being really excited about it and then hitting a
Hmm.
wall.
Yeah, for sure.
Or right, and
Hmm.
like or maybe 150 pages, even more
Hmm.
heartbreaking when you get like three quarters or two-thirds through and then you hit a wall. Those are, as I kind of started learning and teaching this stuff, I was like, well, those are act breaks, that's why it's so hard to get past them. You've
Right.
had your first arc and then you don't know where to go. So yeah, so anyway, I use it primarily to get unstuck, to check my progress. Once you kind of understand the interrelationships of these story beats in like traditional three-act structure, you can like solve story problems by,
Hmm.
when you're stuck, you can reach back to like this other beat and see, or the B plot or whatever, and kind of
Yeah.
start using things from it. So anyway, that's my hobby horse. So
No, I
I'll
love
stop
it.
talking
No,
about it now.
I mean, when I started studying screenplays, and one book I read that was really great, which isn't a very popular one, but it was called How Not to Write a Screenplay. And that was
Mhm.
interesting because it would show like an example of a good page and then a bad page and kind of say, don't do this. And I thought it was really interesting. But one of the things that I discovered was that just how much your imagination fills in the blanks, right? Because
Mm,
when you set up a scene where you're like, okay, you're outside, it's night, there's a guy, he's out, he's coming out the door, he's got a knife in his hand, and all of a sudden your brain just starts doing things, even though
mm,
it's not there on a page. And I thought, well, that's really fascinating,
mm.
right? To where it just boils down to the essence of something that is helping your brain kind of make it work,
That's an interesting way to put it. I never thought
right?
about that. Yeah.
And so, and sometimes when I'm reading a scene that I'm writing, and I think that I'm getting too much in the weeds of this, and the story's just not really going, right? Like, do I really want this person's imagination to sit down in the grass and be sitting here, or is something more interesting over there, you know? And I always, that screenplays that remind me of that because they're so bare bones.
Well, yeah, for me, the best education, I haven't read a lot of screenplays, to be honest. I took a
Okay.
class and yeah, I mean, the books that I've read are, how-to books. And I did take a stab at adapting one or two of my,
Right.
things, but it never went anywhere. I'm not a good screenwriter, really.
Yeah.
Um, but watching movies, it teaches you how to watch movies. Once you like learn these beats, you just can predict like something happens and you're like, oh, I bet we're, 48 minutes in, and you click
Yeah.
and it is, it's
Yeah.
like, I don't find that off-putting. It can be if it's done really heavy-handedly,
Right.
but I find it kind of comforting, even in, very some like experimental and more like artistic films, you see these things and it's because it's about rhythm. It's about like taking the reader or
Hmm.
the viewer on a journey that has like a rhythm to it, right?
Yeah.
And that we've all read books where you're just like, my God, how far how far am I? God, am
Yeah.
I halfway through yet?
Right.
Um, and you just in an amazing book there are books that where the prose is so amazing that you just really don't care and like you lose track and you want to lose track
Right.
of this. But that is like a very, very high echelon. I don't think many people attain it.
Right.
As a former book reviewer,
Right.
I'm like, yeah.
Yeah, well, it's kind of interesting when you see those beats because then, yeah, your brain's like moving forward, but it's always such a nice surprise when the writer knows that and then uses something different. And then you get that surprise. You're like, oh, okay, well, that's awesome because that's not what I thought was going to happen, right?
Yeah, well, my favorite experience watching movies. Sorry, I'm like movie obsessed,
No,
but
it's okay.
my
Let's do it.
favorite experience is when you're so carried away with a story
Hmm.
that you actually totally lose track of where you are. But then when you look back, you can see that the story beats were actually there, but they
Right.
were done, the something about the piece is like so all consuming that you're not noticing it. So that's ideally to me, I wouldn't want the reader to be like, oh, it's the midpoint reversal. Like, here we go.
Yeah.
I want it to just help them to become more immersed in the story, not less.
Right. So what do you think are some tricks that writers can use to maybe enhance some of those things then if they are following some of the beats, like let's say you're learning a dance, same with writing a story, and you're
Mhm.
learning the steps, then what are some of the things that would make it interesting? Would it be voice? Would it be style? What is it that helps that transcend a little bit?
I mean, I just think it's very unique. I think voice, character arc, I don't think these things are actually, I don't think you can really fully separate them from plot. In fact, the way a scene is built, or the way, narration kind of structures our understanding and our filters the information that's coming at us in the story. Yeah, I mean, same with style. It's just all of these things are tools to kind of keep the reader where you want them,
Hmm.
like to invite them in and to keep them turning pages, right? Like even the most kind of highbrow literary or experimental text, it wants you to finish it, right? So there has to
Right.
be a reason. And those things can be ideas or yeah, I mean, I think elevating, and I don't think people should feel like they're bound, like lashed to this three-act structure. There's
Right.
other structures out there, but I just feel like, yeah, I think inhabiting voice fully, having an idea, and I mean, prose style is like an extremely elusive thing to talk about. It's so unique. It's so tied to your individual voice and reader preferences and how you were formed as a writer.
Hmm.
Um, yeah, I find it hard to teach, frankly. I think I find people come into my classes with their voices like very often very intact coming in, and like they can refine it, but it's
Hmm.
what makes you you as a writer. It's just the things that they, maybe need help on are kind of like just getting through a novel, you
Yeah.
know?
I know you have a PhD in English, and so I imagine that your experience in grad school probably had some inspiration on the story. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, I had a completely, I think it's probably typical of a lot of people's PhD experiences, in that it was like somewhat traumatic. Um, and I think it's just a function of, as I said, for me anyway, it was a kind of a toxic relationship. But that was sort of by the end, in the book, I wanted Mac to experience like the seductive thrill of this environment too, with its kind of collaboration, its exciting ideas. It's like, it feels like you're around these like celebrity professors who are so smart, and also I think like a lot of grad students party really hard. Maybe the more rigorous they are in the day, the more they need to let off steam. So I kind of went into the University of Chicago, where this grad program was, it, you know, really starry-eyed and naive. And I think that also kind of contributed to my like inevitable, like the scales fell from my eyes and I was like, this is terrible. Because the farther on you get, the more kind of competitive and intense it gets.
Hmm.
And I think long term, the fear that people feel that they're not going to be blessed by, this particular professor, or they're going to be seen as not smart for like a half second because they don't know something. Like these pressures end up over time becoming, overwhelming. And that's what made this like pressure cooker feel like the perfect place for Mac and Gwen. And even though it's not, I always call it the program, like you don't really know what discipline it is.
Hmm.
And the university is like a made up university. Um, but yeah, I mean, it is drawn largely from, people and experiences that I had there that frankly often had to be toned down. I mean, there was no murder in my program that I knew of.
Uh-huh.
Uh,
Is this a confession, Amy Gentry?
yeah, this is like, yeah, this is off the record.
It's
Um,
actually a memoir. It's not a fiction.
yeah, but I mean, it is like people say, like a roman à clef, to kind of capture this, like, oh, I'm definitely using my experiences, and trying to weave them into this other story. Um, but yeah, I mean, a lot of the things people say in real life are like kind of too out there to even put in a novel, and so
Mhm.
it was fun to kind of come up with the things that people were saying and doing, that seemed crazy enough for readers to laugh, hopefully, and
Right.
wince. But that weren't like the exact same thing because I feel like some of them would defy belief.
Right.
Behave badly in grad school a lot of the time. Not everybody, not all the time, but
Right.
and I include myself in that. I was a murderer, frankly.
Yeah, apparently. Yeah, it's that environment where there are these gatekeepers, there's just inherent competitiveness there.
Hmm.
And it can
Yeah, I
definitely
think
be
that's right.
this extension where they're like these people that are just going at each other.
Yeah, I mean, in the book, I try to make the professors more the villains.
Hmm.
I mean, students behaved badly toward each other. Like it was absolutely could be backstabby at times. But I think for me, I wanted, and like Mac and Gwen are kind of, Mac is the one that's backstabby. But I wanted to focus on the kind of institutional like power structure because I think that's really what's to blame. It's not that people are inherently bad or inherently
Hmm.
good. I think it's just you set up a particular kind of system that's gonna
Right.
not punish bad behavior and often reward it. And yeah, like that's all coming from the top down. Um,
Right.
anyway.
Well, I find it interesting that you said that you have a hard time outlining your stories in advance, but then how do you keep track of some of these nuggets of surprise or the twist while you're doing it if you're not tracking it from the start? Is that something that you go back to revision and then you map out, or?
I mean, sometimes, but a twist is just a character reveal. At least I think in psychological suspense, it usually is.
Mhm.
Um, it's so, I mean, I often like I know these characters very well, and even if I discover something about them late in the game, it's not going to surprise me because I
Right.
know, like so if it makes sense to me, like I'm like, okay, I just have to kind of sell it to the reader. And it's a matter of holding back and then revealing when the time is right. But yeah, no, I really I guess these days they call it a discovery writer rather than a
Mhm.
pantser, which is like the worst possible word to me. Uh, it's like, what does that even mean?
Yeah.
Um, I think most of us are in between, frankly. But
Mhm.
again, I just use the structure to kind of pull me back on track or like check myself. And again, I mean, I'll say it again, like when you're stuck and you've hopefully painted your character into a really tight corner, like there are places you can go back and reach through to kind of like get ideas. A lot of times you've already planted what you need. It's already there. You
Mhm.
just need to like go back and read your own work and remember like that subconsciously or whatever, you have planted yourself a lot of little escape exits.
Mhm.
And it's a matter of just picking the one you want and then kind of weeding the others out.
Right.
So that's kind of how I do it.
Excellent. All right, so now's the time in the show where we do the lightning round. It's a concept we took from inside the actor studio, but they didn't create the concept. They took it from Bernard Pivot, who took it from Marcel Proust, and he probably stole it from somebody else. So, Amy Gentry, are you ready for the lightning
I'm
round?
ready.
Awesome. What is your favorite word?
Um, I'm gonna say churlish right now is it has a big place in my vocabulary right now. I find myself using it in speech a lot.
That's
I like it
excellent.
because when you almost always say like it would be churlish to demand that this work of art do X, Y. And it's like it's always something you say when you're
Mhm.
going to go ahead and do the churlish thing. So
Right. As preamble. So, what's your least favorite word?
I was gonna say I don't have a least favorite word, but I guess it's maybe pantser.
There
I
you
just
go.
went off on pantser a second ago,
Right.
so let's say pantser. But
Yeah, I
most words
learned a
have
new
a
take
place.
on Pantser that if you plan slightly, you're a plantser.
A plantser. Oh
If you
no.
plan slightly, but then do a lot of discovery, then you're you're a
That's
plantser.
yeah, just no. Just no.
Right. Okay, so what turned you on?
Well, I have to preface this. I'm going to answer this question, but I do have to say, I feel like this question is like time to retire it.
Okay.
It's like in the year of our Lord 2024, it is just like, why have a question made up by some white dudes that probably were interviewing other dudes, frankly,
Okay.
mostly. So, I don't know. That's just my 2 cents. I do have an answer of like the way I would interpret this question. I was thinking about how I love horror movies so much. I mainline them, and Hellraiser 2 is a movie I absolutely adore. If you've seen them, Julia Cotton is the villain of the first one. In the second one, she's resurrected by this like fanboy, and she comes back with no skin because that's like how it happens in Hellraiser.
Right.
And she goes to his wardrobe to pick out something to wear, and she grabs this like giant white Armani suit. And she's like she looks like raw meat. And then she puts this white suit on, and it's just like getting bloody on the edges. Such a baller move. And I feel like if I could have a Halloween costume like that, I would just I could do no better. Like can any of us say we're better than Julia Cotton in that moment? No.
Right. Excellent. It's okay. So then what turned you off?
Um well, okay. Did I have an answer for this one? What turns me off? When people cover cakes with fondant
Oh
instead
yeah,
of
it's terrible. I hate
it's like
fondue.
that tastes terrible. Yeah, fondant has its place, but it's like
It's a waste of sugar. All right.
yeah.
So what is your idea of happiness?
My idea of happiness, I think the most simple answer is just to be in a place that's beautiful where I can write and like feeling that amazing productivity day, but where you're like relaxed and happy and the words just come out. Um, when I am more ambitious, I'm like, well, if you ask me what my perfect, like I would like to be in Italy with my like husband and my son and
Right.
have like enough alone time and then partner time. But it's like, okay, well, let's just keep it modest with the writing retreat.
All right. Who's your favorite author?
Henry James.
Henry James. Excellent. Okay. If you could be a character in any novel throughout history, who would that be?
This is so hard. This is like the one I found I had a hard time answering because not my favorite novels are very bleak. That's what I like, you know. So it's like I don't want to be a character in an Anita Bruckner novel or a Dostoevsky novel or even a Henry James novel.
Right.
So after a lot of thought, I decided on like the Cheshire Cat and Alice in Wonderland.
Okay.
That's really the only one I could think of because, you know, he just seems like he's like all knowing. He's kind of tripped out all the time, but he
Yeah.
like gets to like just watch from outside the story and kind of manipulate people. That's what I'd like to do.
Yeah. It just does the pop in. All right.
Mhm.
What profession other than your own would you want to attempt?
Um, I would normally say I just am so happy with this one that I wouldn't want to do anything else. But on the internet the other day, I saw someone, I think you saw this too, say that all writers like secretly want to be musicians.
Hmm.
I'm not sure if that's true, but I do think I would want to be like, I don't know, like I want to be like the lead singer in a rock band or maybe like an amazing violinist or something. Because I do actually think that musicians have like a more direct line to something
Right.
than writers. They're like plugged into like something writers can only wish that they were plugged into.
Yeah, and it's an interesting dynamic because you hear things like Paul McCartney say he always wanted to be a writer. It's kind of a interesting back and forth of like grass is greener, you know.
Sure. I mean, in a perfect world, you can always be both. You probably just
Sure.
can't be the top of both worlds.
Right.
Patti Smith. Patti Smith is both.
Hmm.
Mhm.
Right. So what profession other than, let's see, what profession would you least want to do?
Like pretty much anything in an office. I have worked in offices before, and I have a hard time like literally staying awake. I find the lighting upsetting, and I just in the office culture, I find it fascinating to read about. Like I read Ask a Manager obsessively,
Hmm.
but I hated every office job I ever had. And so like I always like waited tables or, you know, I've had lots and lots of jobs, but they were almost always something like, you know, food service or just random gigs here and there.
Hmm.
So yeah, that's
Excellent. All right. So final question. If heaven exists, what would you like to hear God say when you reach the check-in desk?
um welcome everyone. You're never going to be bored again.
Excellent. Thank you, Amy Gentry. Your excellent novel, Bad Habits. Everybody go out
Thank
and grab a
you.
copy. Book people or book women in Austin, and thanks for being on our show.
Thank you so much, Scott. This is a really cool thing you do for the community. And I just wanted to say thank you for inviting me, and this has been awesome.
Thank you very much.
This has been a presentation of Austin Liti Limits, made possible with help from our good friends at Blue Ink Review, where typing "the end" is just the beginning. Find out more at blueinkreview.com.